First off, I want to welcome you to this webinar, which is sponsored by the Max Pree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary. My name is Mark Roberts, and I'm a senior strategist for the Pree Center. I focus on the spiritual formation of marketplace leaders and on the flourishing of leaders in the third of life. The Pree Center has produced many resources to help leaders respond faithfully to God's callings in all seasons of life. And we create tools to help people grow in their sense of purpose, to deal with issues that matter, and to move toward greater fruitfulness in life. And you can find these tools on the Pree Center website. By the way, I should mention that you'll see in the chat that there are, we'll put links and stuff in the chat so that you can kind of follow along if you want to check those out. Among the things you'll discover, we have a bunch of webinars we've done where we interview leaders of note, and especially in relationship to what we call the third of life. And today I'm excited to host a webinar with one of these outstanding leaders, Dr. Corey Kai Liao. Now, let me say a game plan about the webinar so you'll know what's coming on. After I introduce Dr. Liao, he and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes or so. And then there'll be an opportunity for him to respond to questions from you. If at any point during this conversation you have a question, please put it in the Q&A function, not the chat function, but the Q&A, and we'll be monitoring that, and then we'll ask those questions when the time is right. So you can, anytime, you can put a question in there. I should mention too, the webinar is being recorded so that you can see it again and or share it with your friends. It'll be available via the Pree Center website. So in my work at the Pree Center with our Flourishing in the Third of Life initiative, I'm always looking for just really compelling examples of people who are flourishing in retirement, doing interesting things, making a difference in the world. And a few weeks ago, I stumbled on this wonderful video from a TV station in Honolulu, and it featured Dr. Corey Kai Liao, a doctor whose retirement story was surprising and inspiring. And so I emailed him just to say, thank you, and I appreciate this. Would it be okay if we passed along your story to others? And pretty soon we were going back and forth, and Dr. Liao agreed to do this webinar for us on the topic, Finding Unexpected Meaning in Retirement. So Dr. Corey Kai Liao is a medical doctor. He's a professor and a researcher who has published over 50 peer-reviewed articles in neurology. Dr. Liao is also the director of a medical clinic in Honolulu, Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience. And in this capacity, he cares for patients, he oversees research, he mentors medical students. He's married to Michelle, who is his partner in work as well as the rest of life. So I'm excited for you to be able to hear firsthand this story of Dr. Liao and to learn more about what led him into this and what he's doing today in retirement, quote unquote. And in one of our email exchanges, I brought up the subject of faith, and I wasn't surprised to learn that Dr. Liao is a committed follower of Jesus. He says he does everything for the glory of God, and he's very involved in his church in Honolulu. So, Dr. Liao, thank you so much for being with us on this webinar. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know it'll be inspiring for folks, so thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Mark, and thank you for the invitation and for the work that you at the Pree Center are doing. It's an honor to be here.
Thanks, that's great. So let me ask you, Dr. Liao, just the sort of most basic question. So as I learned about you, and in the 2000s, you're a professor of neurology at the University of Kansas. You're the director of an epilepsy center. You've got a busy and fruitful professional life. And then in 2009, things began to change. So why don't you pick up the story there?
Well, thank you. Thank you. What happened was the story, the news clip that you saw was from Diane Ako from ABC station here in Honolulu on a segment. She contacted me to do a segment on one of the newly approved Alzheimer's medication, Leqembi. And as she was talking to me, she found out how old I was and what I was doing, and she just said, "Why don't you do a segment on the kupuna segment?" Kupuna is the elderly in Hawaii. So I wasn't actually very happy about her. I wasn't very happy with her. I said, "Wait, we're here to do a segment to talk about Alzheimer's drug, and here you are trying to get me to do a segment on it's called Aging Well." So obviously, I agreed. Diane was so gracious, and that's how it all got started. And I did share a little bit with the segment that all of our life, as many of you are professionals, and whether you are in healthcare or marketplace or business, you have always moved to places where your training is. For myself, I've always moved to Utah, Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania, to where my training and my job is, and eventually ended up in Kansas for the last 10 years. So it was just at the point in our life where my wife and me looked at each other and said, well, what are we going to do now? And we wanted to go somewhere where we actually want to go. And we didn't have too much ties. We really had a great time in Kansas. But we just didn't have the family ties and the connection to the place. So we just decided that Hawaii was just the next destination for us to be. And we just decided to go somewhere where we actually want to go and live, and not just because of a job or a training. So that's how it got all started. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of us listening to this are thinking, yeah, I could see that Hawaii would be a good place to live. So we're with you. So you moved to Hawaii thinking that you pretty much retired, but you didn't just sit on the beach and enjoy the beauty of Hawaii in sail or whatever. Tell us what happened when you got there.
Well, it didn't last very long because we just hang out in the apartment for about a week, and I think that was all that Michelle could take of me, and told me that it's time that you get back to work, because I was just having all kinds of plans with her, and we can do this, we can do that, and we I had a short what we call locum job in Hawaii. I was just working for one of the company on a short term, and from that job we sort of found out the tremendous need. It was for the healthcare needs on the island. People had to wait a long time to get specialty care, especially in neuroscience, and the people that do get care usually have insurance. The people that don't have insurance, they usually don't get the care that they need, or they just kind of do without, or they wait a long time. We're talking about 6 months to a year to see a specialist. So that's when our plan sort of became secondary. There was we sort of found our purpose to be there, and we sort of prayed, and God just sort of opened the doors for us to insert ourselves where the needs are, and that's how it all rolled. And
so, if I'm hearing right, you became aware of really significant needs, both in terms of just the availability of service, but especially for people who don't have the resources for it. And so, what did you do?
So, when it was hard to describe, because when God put certain feelings in your heart, when God breaks your heart for certain things, He usually has a reason for doing that. It really broke our heart when we saw what was happening, and we just need to respond. Sometimes God breaks our heart, and then we just sort of, oh, it's somebody else's problem. We just move on. This is not my issues. Somebody else got it. And we just need to say no. So that's when we try to say no. We try to walk away from it, but we just couldn't. It really broke our heart, and we just knew that there was a purpose for us to be there. What happened was we approached several organizations, and basically they said, it's not going to work. You're never going to be able to be successful in a practice here unless you're working for the big organization, which at my stage in my life, I'm sure many of your audience are, you're not just wanting to do a job. You're looking for fulfillment. You're looking for legacy. You're looking for meaning and in a job. So that's when we decided that I wasn't going just to work for anybody. I just wasn't going to take up any job that comes my way. We have the luxury, in our stage in our life, and that's when God was really good to us. So we just decided to do things that other people didn't want to do, pick up the people with no insurance, pick up the people on Medicaid and Medicare. And it was really hard, a lot of hard work, but thanks to my wife, Michelle, who really, it's a trooper, really saw us through. And thanks to the mercy and great goodness of God and the goodness of the people in the community. We were able to pull through many of these things. Yeah.
So great. And so now you have this thriving center for neurology, yes, in Honolulu. And you do a lot of different things. You want to describe just some of what you do, because I know it's not just treating patients. You have a lot going on.
Right. Well, besides treating patients, especially those who are underserved, uninsured, two other things that we're doing. One is just mentoring young people, medical students and residents. When I first came here, people knew that I was a professor on the mainland and knew that I was doing research. They said, "We're going to send you residents. We haven't had anybody to mentor them for a long time." I said, "What do you mean? What have you guys been doing all this time?" They just said, "There's nobody. You're it." I kind of felt like they were just going to do it whether I like it or not. They're coming. They're coming to you. So it was a joy and pleasure to take them. Obviously, I had to find ways to incorporate them into what I was doing already without, feeling like they were a burden. Sometimes having medical students and residents, you felt like you're just trying to survive, and here you are, put it on added responsibility. But thank goodness, Michelle and me are a good delegator. One of the skills that we learned very well in our life in business is delegating. So I was able to recruit a few more physicians and delegate. So we have a schedule. Today you take one, the next day, you rotate with, right. Just like we have right now, we have one resident and two medical students on rotation with us. So every day they go through different specialists. The second thing was we found out there was no research, clinical trials on the island as well, especially in the area of neuroscience. There was some research in oncology or cancer. Patients are traveling to the mainland. Mainland means the continental US, but in California, Mayo Clinic, Cleveland, they're flying there. It is a significant burden to the family who has to fly there every month or every 2 weeks. And not everybody can afford to do that. So it was only for the really privileged people on the island. And there was a research project that sort of fell into my lap. I felt like it was also another one of those God thing. It just fell in my lap and said that you're going to have to do this. Otherwise, the patient's going to have to travel to California every 2 weeks. Aren't you going to help them? I'm like, since that's how you put it, I guess I have no choice but to do it. So that's how it got started. And one thing led to another. And indeed, there was a huge need. And now we are doing about 40 plus clinical trials on the island, working with various organizations. We're very privileged and very honored. And we have about 50 residents and medical students and research students working with us every year. So we believe that part of what we're supposed to do was to be here for these purposes. Yeah.
Isn't that something? I'm just so struck. The work of the Pree Center, we focus very much on leaders in the marketplace. We serve some pastors too, and that's good. But really, our focus is folk who are out there: doctors, lawyers, business people, entrepreneurs, educators, and really trying to help them discover what it means to live their faith in the context of your work. And as you're talking, partly I'm thinking, oh, you're such a great example of that. And then in our third work, it's really trying to help folks think about how they can use their gifts and opportunities and wisdom to serve others, especially those who are younger leaders. And as you talk about this mentoring in the thing you're doing, that's very much in our heart to encourage folks to do that sort of thing. So I also love that you and your wife are such great partners in this work, and it's just you know, if any of our listeners watch any of your videos, so sometimes your wife shows up, and it's really fun. So let me ask you a little different question. So, I mean, you're this amazing doctor and researcher and professor, and you have this track record, and you're doing this work. But as you and I have talked, you're also deeply committed to Christ. And you've already mentioned God a little bit here, but I'd like to ask you more explicitly, you know, how has your faith in Christ made a difference in your life, especially in retirement?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that. First, I thank you for bringing up Michelle, my wife, because she really gets all the credit. She's my better half. And trust me, there were days when we don't go to sleep until we resolve a conflict. Sometimes we will stay up very late working together, but she's definitely plays such a tremendous role in what I do, and I have to give her all the credit. Coming back to your questions on the faith part, it was a walk of faith for us in so many ways, because it just wasn't, you know, the opportunities present and the need was there. Believe me, we debate with God a lot. We try to find ways out of it. You know, sometimes, you know, how when there was a need and God called you, we're like the Jonah. We were jumping into the whale's mouth. We were trying to run away, but at the end, we knew that the best path forward, we knew that God was going to do it with or without us first. The need was going to be fulfilled. And we just come to realization that of all the people God could have called to do this, He called us. And we're just ordinary people. We're just not anything special. We're just honored to do it. That God chose us to do it.
Yeah. Well, it is kind of amazing how God arranges things, because I think even, we have somebody else joining us who I don't think is supposed to be on screen. Paul, can you help him? Anyway, that's kind of funny. You never know, do you? But I'm struck by the fact that as you were over there in Kansas trying to figure out where you wanted to live, that God knew there was this need over in Hawaii. And, you know, I just think that not only did you respond when the call was there, but you can kind of see the hand of God moving when you had no idea that that's what was going on yet. And it's just amazing how God is able to do that. I love that. So, and you mentioned being pretty active in a church, yes, in Honolulu?
We get the privilege of teaching a Bible study in our church, First Assembly of God, under our wonderful Pastor Clayton and Sharon Cole. We get to teach a Sunday school every week, which is such a joy and honor for us to do so. We get to serve on the board, and also nationally, we get to serve in Springfield for the Assemblies of God national office. We get to serve on the Assembly of God World Missions under Greg Mundis, the previous director, and now under John Easter. We get the privilege of serving under Greg and also Randy Hertz, two wonderful people. So we're so grateful for the opportunities and the privilege to be part of what they're doing. And We just this is such a wonderful opportunities for us. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Dr. Liao, I expect that, I mean, people who are listening are certainly inspired by your example and your story, but I can imagine somebody out there thinking, well, that's all great, but I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not a world-class neurologist, and I'm not sure I have much to offer in retirement. What encouragement might you give to somebody who maybe isn't yet seeing what they could actually do?
Great questions. Actually, I'm glad not all of you are neurologists, because we'll be in so much trouble if you guys are all neurologists. Our world is going to be very confused. Um, um, Mother Teresa once said, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. You
Mm,
know, she mentioned that you do ordinary things with extraordinary love. It's not how much that we do, but how much love we put in the action that we do. We can do a lot of things, but if we do it without meaning, without love, it is really empty, you know. So whatever that our audience is involved in, whatever groups, whatever that God has put in their lives, wherever they are in, I do encourage them to make the best use of it. You may
mm,
not like the group that you're in, but God put you in that group. God knew that somebody needed you. You know, somebody, you have the skills and you have the expertise, you have just the right character to feel a certain needs wherever you are.
mm,
However simple it is, maybe it's just a small Bible study group, your friends, your golf buddies, wherever you are, or church group, or whatever you volunteer for in
mm,
headache group, Alzheimer's Association, Epilepsy Foundation, whatever you volunteer for, you are there for a purpose. You have certain skills and personality that is so much needed there. Um, Make use of every opportunity. Do everything with love. Do ordinary things with extraordinary love.
man, I love it. Thank you. That's so right, and I know that that will be encouraging to folks. Uh, Dr. Liao, I'm sure you've had the experience as a medical doctor. If people know you're a medical doctor, and immediately they'll start talking to you about their issues, especially if they know you're in a neurology. Like, yeah, I've got this numbness in my hand or whatever. And it's just, I have doctor friends who, and they understand. So I'm not going to bring up my own medical challenges here. That would be taking advantage. But I would like to ask you a couple of questions, actually more related to your expertise. And so as I mentioned, we're focusing a lot these days on the third of life. It's just a kind of a neutral way to talk about being 55 and older, something like that. Um, and you deal with a lot of that with the people you're serving. Could you just talk a little bit about some of the things that those of us who are older often experience in relationship to your work?
Right, right. No, thank you for asking. I love talking about these things because this is what I do every day.
Yeah.
So from the background perspective, my practice has mostly been focused on patients with memory disorders, with either early Alzheimer's, mild cognitive impairment, or Alzheimer's dementia. And most of the work that I do is bringing research therapies to patients who otherwise have no options. So no, I love that you're asking. One of the things that is really exciting, obviously there are a lot of exciting things going on in this field with new medications, new therapies. One of the things that we are exploring into is a group of people called the super agers. Not sure if you've heard of it. Some of the
Mm,
audience may have heard of it. Since we're talking about the third, these are people who are 80 years old and older, but their mind is as sharp as people in their 40s and 50s. Your brain, we think that the brain will start to decline after age 30, but somehow this particular group of people, which we call super agers, their mind stays very sharp.
Mm.
So what are the signatures of the super agers? There's a few things. Number one is if we looked at certain part of the brain called the anterior cingulus, maybe I'll just do this.
Ah, excellent.
So if you split the brain into half, and here you are. There we go. So if you look at this part of the brain, and this is the front of the brain. This is the corpus callosum that connects the right hemisphere with the left hemisphere. So the front of the brain, this is called the cingulus. So the orange part of the brain. So this is the anterior cingulus, means the front part of the cingulus. That's kind of like the collar that wears, kind of protecting. So this super agers, the anterior cingulus is especially thick. So number one. And number two is we also found that there is an increased number of what we call von Econo cells in this part of the brain. We don't exactly know why. So what does the anterior cingulus and the von Econo cells do? What they do is these are what we think cells responsible for salient information processing or emotional IQ.
Mm.
You know, just processing deep information and impulse control, and people with good emotional IQ tends to have thick anterior cingulus. So several characteristics also stands out with the super agers. Two things I wanted to share with my audience. Number one is the super agers tend to embrace mental challenges. They are willing to go outside of the comfort zone. So if anything, I can encourage your audience is if you are aging, if you want to know how to keep your brain healthy, keep taking on mental tasks that challenges yourself. For example, if you're afraid of technology, you're afraid of using the iPhone, this is the time to do something different. Learn the new skills. Take up the iPhone, and instead of have your grandchildren, have your son and daughter walk you through it and learn the new skills. If you haven't fixed anything in the house ever before, this is the time to learn the new skills. Be willing to embrace a mental challenge and go outside of a comfort zone. The second thing that we realize about these super agers is, and this is from a study done at Northwestern. They interview survivors of Holocaust survivors. They interview people with PTSD trauma. These super agers have the mental capacity to have an extreme amount of resiliency. When they handle a trauma, they don't see defeat. They tend to see opportunities. They tend to see a way out of a trauma. So, we all go through trauma. We all go through challenges in life, but it's how we perceived it and how we handle it that really makes a difference. If we allow the trauma to really get into us, it creates all kinds of toxic chemicals in our brain, and that leads to early dementia, that leads to early deposition of the amyloid proteins. But these super agers, they tend to have a high resiliency, and they handle trauma very well, which reminds me of a verse in the Bible. If we all know that the Bible tells us that in this world we will have trouble, but take heart. Jesus have overcome them all. Even in the midst of the trouble, you're going to be okay. Your God is greater than anything that you're facing. So isn't it great that God has already given us some information and some advice to be super agers? Yeah. But sometimes we just forget. Right. We just want to go our own way. So sorry for the long answer, but I love talking about these things. Thank you.
It's important, and it's relevant, and coming from you, as I'm sure you know, I mean, you can go on the internet and find 1,000 different promises for how you can live longer and do this and that, and most of it is just kind of silly. But coming from someone like you, that is an encouragement, and it's also an encouragement because, as I'm sure you know, there are studies that show that people's fear of Alzheimer's, in some cases, it's the biggest fear they have, even more than cancer or heart disease. And part of that fear is I'm completely helpless. And certainly there are things that are we can't control. But what you're suggesting is there are actually some things we can do to help our brains be what, stronger, more resilient, hang in there. It may not prevent, but it could perhaps delay the onset of some of these diseases. Yeah. Now, I know you've also been working on a new drug, and you mentioned it earlier. I'm not going to steal your thunder and talk about it, but more, will you tell us about this new drug for Alzheimer's and kind of the role that you and your center had in helping this to come to pass?
Sure. Our Memory Center and Alzheimer's Research Unit is part of a national consortium. We're not to do clinical trials on some of these new drugs like lecanemab, Leqembi, or aducanumab, Aduhem. Those are two that are recently approved by FDA. So we are just part of the consortium to offer these drugs. So basically what this newly FDA approved drug tries to do is to try to at least stop the amyloid or Alzheimer's protein that is being produced that interfere with the neurons synapsing, the neurons talking to each other. So that's really the goal. Obviously, patients can when the drugs goes and breaks off the protein, the brain actually sometimes react to it, and sometimes the brain can swell or what we call amyloid-related imaging abnormalities. So some patients can have swelling in the brain or even small bleeding in the brain. So you should really talk to your neurologist, talk to your doctors about before about the possibility of these drugs. Obviously, it's not available in all the cities. They are available in select research sites. And we're very privileged and honored to be one of those sites to be able to offer that to our patients. Yeah.
It's so encouraging because, as of course you know, it's not as if we have many drugs that do this sort of thing, and it seems, if I've heard you right, it can slow the progression of the disease, conceivably. I know there's much that needs to be studied.
Well, we hope that it will slow, in the studies that shows the patients that are, for example, on Aduhem, the memory score improved by 22%, and the amyloid proteins decreased by about 70%. So there's good evidence that it's affecting the disease process, not just treat the symptoms.
Yeah.
So it's encouraging. But to get back to your questions, besides drugs and treatment, there are things that we can certainly do. Lifestyle changes certainly will make a difference. Having a good healthy diet makes a difference. Having a regular exercise, aerobic exercise 3 times a week, moderate, will make a difference. Having a good night of sleep. When it's been found that when you don't get enough sleep, your amyloid proteins get built up really fast. Having a good amount of sleep is so important to our brain health. So there are so many things, besides just doing Sudoku, but learn from the super agers. It's just how you handle stress that really will make a difference.
Yeah, man, that's so encouraging. Hey, we're getting some questions in the Q&A now, and so I thought I'll ask you these and let you respond. Somebody wonders if learning a new language is one of those sort of mental tests, that challenges it could help us.
Wonderful question. Learning a new language is great because it involves so many different parts of your brain. It involves the auditory cortex, involves the visual cortex, the visual cortex involves motor function. So it involves different part of the brain. When you get the different parts of the brain to make connections, to form new connections, it really stimulates something. So learning a foreign language, a new language, is just the thing that I think I want to encourage our audience to do. Great question.
Wonderful. Great. That is. And I've read also in places that learning an instrument is similar in that it activates a lot of your brain to do that.
Absolutely, especially musical instruments. I mean, you're not going to be the next Mozart, but you're going to do some good for your brain.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so another question. And this is about mentoring. What do you see is most important in mentoring future healthcare professionals in light of your years of experience? And this was asked by someone who is a professor. I don't know what, but so what do you see is important in mentoring?
You know, we have a lot of medical students and residents here, and young faculty that I'm in the process of mentoring. One of the things that I am encountering in this new culture is perhaps commitment from, you know, the new the younger faculty, the younger residents and medical students. Even when they want to do a project, they would like, what do you mean I have to come in to meet you? Can we meet on Zoom? You know, it's like, this is a big commitment, you know, that we, so I think commitment, helping them to see the value of commitment and longevity, sustainability. I think that's one important, and I'm learning in the process to deal with this younger generation as well. And I think the second thing is important that I've learned myself is trying to speak their language, you know, the millennial language, dealing with the millennials. You know, they would take criticism, they would take feedback different the way that I would take it. So what I have done is I have, when I have a feedback, sometimes it's better they coming from another peer. I would let the group leader, I would let the research group leader know that, hey, you know, can you talk to so and so about this, you know, instead of me approaching them directly, because I was told that when I approach them directly, it's like a death sentence to them. You know, it's like, I was just talking to them about something, you know, but it appears that perhaps the culture gap. So I've learned to delegate well, to my utilize the millennial to millennial. So hopefully those hopefully the professor can use some of those skills, and I'm interested in what others will say too, because I'm learning myself as well.
Isn't that something? So that would be actually a good example of one of those brain challenges. Let me learn to communicate with people who aren't of my generation and discover how they think and feel, and yeah, that's, so it's really paying attention to the people you're mentoring and where they are and how they think and feel. And yeah, that's a great question.
Sure.
So we've got another question here. By the way, somebody had asked about the name of the drugs. I linked to Leqembi in the webinar chat, but you mentioned another one. What was that other one?
Aduhelm, ADUHELM.
Okay.
Or the generic name is aducanumab.
All right.
And certainly I could chat in there as well.
There it is. Thank you. Well, that's great. Because I know folks will be interested in that, and it's really very encouraging. So we got some other questions. Let me see if I can get these in here. How much do you think social media is impacting the happiness of young people and their mental health?
Huge. And by the way, I just put the link for some of the clinical trials and drugs in the chat, if they want to go in there. That's a great question about the social media. And social media utilizes, understands the reward system of the brain, which is the dopamine system. You know, when you click on something, when you have a like, when people like your your page, it creates a reward loop. You know, it creates a dopamine, you know, so it creates sort of unhealthy level of dopamine in the brain, or the brain just expects, you know, this amount of dopamine. And when nobody likes your page, you sort of go into a depression, because you start wondering why nobody likes me. Was that something wrong? You know, but the fact is that there's nothing wrong with you, you know. And so social media has figured out that the dopamine reward system in the brain and utilize it very well, which unfortunately to the detriment of the younger generation who craves that feedback, craves that input, that dopamine reward system that they get, that burst of dopamine they get when they see something alike or something. So which is unfortunate, but certainly there's good evidence and good studies to suggest that people who are on social media for excessive amount of time, they're less happy and they're more prone to depression and even suicide. So,
well,
good question. Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for that answer. That's good. So another question. As older generations, we did not have. He that was the rest of his question. We didn't have the challenge of social media when we were younger, and yes, that's certainly true. All right, another question here. Where can we watch, hear, or read testimonies of superagers whose mental abilities are strong, but whose physical bodies have become weak from chronic diseases from which there are no cure?
Yeah, thank you. So the two institutions that are doing great research on superagers are Northwestern University in Chicago, the Masulam Alzheimer's Research Unit. I've known Dr. Masulam, and they are really on the forefront of research on superagers. So go to the Northwestern University Department of Neurology and look for cognitive neurology and aging. The other institution that's doing good work on superagers are Harvard. So also go to Harvard website at Department of Neurology. Just type in superagers. I think you will find lots of good information, credible information about superagers.
Thank you. That's helpful because that's certainly interesting. And again, to see what those who are really studying this seriously are saying, and not just those of us who have the latest fad or something like that. Another question. This is following up on the language question. How does speaking, reading, listening to another language you've learned compare to learning a new one? It feels like mental gymnastics, but not sure if it has the same effect. So I guess the question is, yes. So you have a primary language, but you also are actively working in another one. Is that also stretching your brain somehow?
Yeah. So anything learning a foreign language is a huge task. I'm not sure. I'm sure your audience will realize that whether and Americans fought it very hard. And Mark, you realize that Americans, we have the lowest rate of second language of any country.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and because we were so used to just using English, you know, and there is good evidence to suggest that people who has a second language or third language, they tend to keep their brain healthier for longer. I have even seen patients who had a stroke in the primary language cortex, and then they would preserve the second language. So there are good evidence, good studies to suggest that learning a foreign language, learning a second or third language is actually extremely beneficial for the brain because it forces you to embrace new mental challenges, forces your brain to branch off neuroplasticity, to branch off some of the neurons to other parts of the brain that have never been activated before. We know that as we get older, there's neurodegeneration, but certain parts of the brain stay very active. For example, you can ask a fairly advanced stage dementia patients, they can sing a song for you that they know very well. They can still play a musical instrument very well. You'll be surprised, and they'll come alive when you introduce a music that they are familiar with. So those language music are really the last thing to go, and those are great task to really invest your time in.
That's what you just described about music and singing. So not long ago, I did a memorial service for a man who had pretty serious Alzheimer's for 10 years. So it was a long stretch. And near the end, of course, his abilities had been quite compromised. However, his family discovered that that they could sing the hymns that he loved, and he would join them. So he didn't know who they were, but it's exactly what you say. So I mean, I've seen it, but you're kind of explaining sort of how that works.
The funny story is, Mark, I call up our pastor that married us many years ago, more than 25 years ago. We were having a wedding anniversary. I was planning a surprise anniversary for my wife. And I tracked him down, I called him down, and this pastor in Salt Lake City. And I said, Pastor, do you remember me? You married Michelle and me many, many years ago. Are you going to be at the conference? He said, no, I don't remember you, but he carried on a conversation with me for 5 minutes. And I heard his wife in the background say, who are you talking to? He said, nobody. But eventually his wife grabbed the phone and got on the phone with me. I said, she eventually revealed to me that pastor has Alzheimer's dementia. So which I should have knew, talking to him. But here's the funny part. So we actually eventually arranged the surprise anniversary. Was our 20th wedding anniversary that I arranged for my wife, a surprise. And we actually had pastor on the TV screen, and he preached a message without missing a beat in his advanced stage of Alzheimer's. So it is remarkable how the brain, that part of the brain still functions. And I've heard of pastors who wakes up in the middle of the night in advanced stage dementia and start preaching. And so it is amazing that God kept those functions critical, especially for my wedding anniversary. So I was very thankful for that.
That's wonderful. We did not know that, and that's so interesting. I have somebody else. He wants to know, is learning a creative skill. He mentions watercolor painting. I mean, does that help your brain too? Everybody wants to know if their thing will help your brain.
So it depends. It depends. If you are a professional painter, then it's not, because that would be second nature to you. But if you have never painted, you have never done anything like this, it is great for your brain. So it has to be outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned it, reemphasized that, because that requires it's easier to do only the things in your comfort zone. And I think especially as we get older, it's easy to sort of shrink down our lives. And what you're talking about is a more expansive approach. And I'm going to have to, when we're done here, I'm going to have to think about what I need to take on and to stretch my brain in new ways. Actually I have grown children, playing all the board games they want to play. Those actually stretches my brain. So let's see. I've got just time for one more question, and then we'll work on finishing. Oh, there are a couple more here. Now, do you think overprescribing drugs is a problem that leads to brain function deterioration and less happiness as we age? It seems like we are pitched so many drugs for every kind of issue. So someone's wondering, could drugs be a negative impact on our brains?
Great question. For sure. I think it is said that an average Americans over 55 is on 8 to 10 drugs, and on the average, perhaps only 2 or 3 are really relevant, and physicians are so short on time when they have a symptoms. They try to treat symptoms. Okay, you're depressed. Here's a medication. You're anxious. Here's another medication. You have cholesterol. Here's another medication. So you end up with so many medications. So I really appreciate the questions. Personally, the way to really declutter or get rid of a drug is, if you've not seen a geriatrician, this is a great time to have one, or have a conversation with your primary care physician and go through the list of medication, what you really need, what you don't need, what some drugs are interacting with each other or canceling each other out. Maybe we can get rid of both of them. So great questions. I really think that we should really declutter our medication.
Yes, and thanks for the advice and sort of some ways to do that. So as we're wrapping this up, I know we've got folks listening to us live and many others who will watch later many of whom are in this stage of life where you once were. They're either in retirement or approaching it, and aren't sure what they ought to do with their lives. And I'm just wondering, so you've got some folks that are eager. Is there any advice you would give? You've already given some along the way, but any sort of closing advice you'd say to the folks who are wondering what they ought to do in this new season of life?
Well, for sure, Mark, not all of us can do what you do. Not all of us is going to be a Mark doing something so remarkable. Thank you. Thank you for what you do, for the impact that you have on so many people. My advice to our audience is just do something, just start, because that's the hardest part. If you're in church, that would be a great place. The church always needs volunteers. Go and volunteer as a greeter, go and volunteer as a babysitter, a server, on the food service line, whatever you can do, please just do it, and be faithful. Because your pastors appreciate you being faithful and showing up. Just volunteer and do it with great love. Do small things with great love. And then if you still want to do something else, go and volunteer for a support group. There is great Alzheimer's Association support groups. Volunteer for the Parkinson's support group. Go and volunteer. They need volunteers. We really need them. So just do something small. Start with something small and do it with great love and be faithful.
Wow. What a perfect place to end. I know you're not a preacher, but if you were, you just ended on the right note. That was great. And thank you. Dr. Corey Liao, thank you so much for how you're living and being willing to let your life show an example of folk who are living in maybe somewhat initially surprising ways in this season of life, wanting to serve people, seeing needs, using your gifts and talents that are uniquely yours in a way to make a difference for God's kingdom in the world. So, and then thanks for letting us help to tell your story and encourage people. And along the way, give us some advice about living that, will help us to have stronger brains and help our thinking be maintained and guarded. So I appreciate your info there. For folks that are let me say once again to folks who've joined us, we have many more webinars like this, focusing on issues in the third of life. The Dupree Center has a much broader piece. This is just a part of our overall work, and we've also got webinars on other things. So again, if you go to our website thanks. Paul's actually just put that in the chat too. You can see where the webinars are. If you go to our website for the Dupree Center, dupree.org, lots of information, and we're glad to be able to share that with you. So, Dr. Liao, again, thank you so much for this conversation, for the chance to engage. It's really a privilege for us to get to know you a bit and learn from you. So, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Aloha.
All right. And aloha to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us.